Hi everyone, I think we are live. Let me know if you can hear me okay. Tonight we are working in acrylics. I'm using Liquitex Basics as usual. I'm working on a Fredrix Pro Series linen canvas. I love these canvases so much. It was kind of funny, side story while we get started. I remember seeing in art forums back in maybe the early 2000s. I hadn't been painting very long, or maybe, yeah, around 2000, 2005, right around there. And artists talking about using linen canvases. And I remember thinking that it was like this elitist idea of, oh, I use a linen canvas, like I have a Coach purse or, something like that. Yeah, no, they really are pretty awesome. Big difference on the painting surface, just the way that the weave is. Such a nice surface when you're going for super smooth detail. So these and the blue label are my favorites for the detail. And I've got my little sister texting me about if I am good at stats. I'm bad at math. I don't know if that's what she wants to know. Let's see. And Valerie just reminded me to hit record, so thank you for that. So what I'm going to get started on are these flowers down here. I've already airbrushed the background here. That's not finished though. I'm going to go back later because I have to kind of balance out the transition between the in focus portion into the out of focus right now on the other side, which you can't see, and there's no easy way for me to show you. Actually, I posted it last night on Instagram, so you can go over there and see. But there's a real harsh transition between in focus, out of focus, and I need to fade that out. So that's on my to-do list. Is the volume okay for you guys? I don't know how I've got the volume button on my mic is behind it, so it's really hard for me to see what it was set at. I could have it turned at a totally bad volume setting. Okay, so I am going to start this by blocking in where my grass is going to go approximately. I don't need it to be perfect. I just want to get a general idea of where the green areas are going to go on this. And actually, there's not too many on this side. The other side had a lot. Where is my mouse? Come on. There you are. In this reference photo, I don't have a link for it. I got it from Pixabay, and the deer comes from wildlifereferencephotos.com. I'm just combining the two, and I'm going to end up with light bulbs hanging off his antlers. I just haven't gotten that far. Okay, everyone's saying his volume is good, so yay. Okay, so let's go ahead and block in where some of the green is going to go. I am going, which brush did I use for that? I'm going to use a flat Taklon bristled brush. This one is one of the Master's Touch brushes from Hobby Lobby. And I'm just going to go ahead and mix in some of my green. I'm using Hooker's green mixed with a little bit of Naples yellow. Now, the main reason that I'm using the Naples yellow here is Hooker's green is not super opaque. By adding the Naples yellow, which is opaque, it gives me more coverage without having to just jump straight to white and create a very pastel color. So let's see, we're going to have some of these here. Now I will paint over all of these later. I just kind of want to have a general idea of where these are going to go. Actually, I think I'm going to skip a little bit and get some of the dark areas first. Yeah, I'm going to jump ahead really quickly. As you can see as I paint, I will do things in a different order every time. This isn't a situation where there's one right or wrong way. There are so many different ways to get to a very similar end. As you're painting, I just kind of think like, what's going to make this easier for me? So I'm going to switch to this brush. This one is also one of the Master's Touch, and I wish they still made these. This is a generic Hobby Lobby. I don't even know what type of bristles these are, but it's got two ends on it that I love, a flat and then the round, and I really, really, really wish they still made these, but they don't. Okay, so let's see. This area is going to be very dark, so I'm going to block that in. There are other companies who make the dual sides like this. My thing is, I don't know, there's just something about these bristles that I absolutely love. So and if I get these dark areas in the wrong spot, it does not really matter. This is just an approximate. I'm going to be putting so many colors over this later on. It doesn't matter. I technically could just start with black, like paint this entire section down here black, and then paint the flowers and everything over it. That would also be a way to work. Meets Art Gallery says, do you prefer, whoops, that's just scrolled past. Do you prefer a perfect smooth technique or a more energetic expressive technique, and why? I prefer smooth. That's just my preference. Ask me in 2 years, I may change my mind. I change my mind about things every 5 minutes. Right now, I prefer things to be quite smooth. Now, I am okay with brushstrokes showing to an extent. I'm not worried about everything looking like an absolute photograph. I'm okay with having brushstrokes, especially in this one show. But yeah, generally, it's just personal preference. I mean, it's kind of like having someone say, well, do you prefer chocolate or strawberry? And why? You just do. You just have your preference. I don't know if there's a necessary like science behind it. I know with art, people like to kind of come up with all of this whole psychological reasoning behind this and that. I don't have that. I just paint what interests me at that moment. I'm not sure how helpful that is to you. Paul says, can you speak on any techniques that might be helpful that may help drawing white subjects like white dogs on white, on white paper using colored pencils? Yes. Okay, look up my video, look up Lachri and color matching. I've got 2 videos that you can see for both for one's for an app on your phone and one is using Photoshop, how I color match. Look at how white is not white. That is the biggest tip I have for you. White's not white. And it's not that it's hard to do, it's just that it's not going to be white. The only white areas of your painting or drawing are going to be the areas that are like super, super highlighted. Straight white, not the case. I mean, even on my mountains, which you can't see right now, but if you look at the photo on Instagram, these mountains where I've got a lot of white on them, they're not actually white. I mixed a little bit of black and brown in with them to tone them down. They're not, they look white. When you look at them, your eyes say, hey, that's white, but they're not. So anytime you're painting something that's white or a white subject, it's probably not going to be white paint. You'll use some white paint, but not straight white. Look at all of the different colors that are going to be in there. You kind of have to convince your head, I'm not just drawing white, I'm copying what is on here, but those color matching tools will make it way easier. Don Hill says, is there a comparable Hobby Lobby polychromos paper? Of the papers that Hobby Lobby carries, when I was teaching there, I would have students either get the Strathmore Vellum or the Bristol Vellum. Not my favorite because it's really hard to get the color saturation you want, but the surface is it's okay to work on. Or the drawing paper, but the problem with the Strathmore drawing paper, I liked it. I love the tooth of that. It's too lightweight for me. I want to say it's 65, 70, 75 pounds, right around there. Too lightweight for me. I didn't love it. Those are the only 2 that I kind of liked there, but I don't personally use them or necessarily even really recommend them. But if you're going to get a paper from there, those are the 2 that I've been okay with. Like I said, I won't use them for my own artwork, but for learning, they're not the worst. Beck says, when airbrushing, how do you wash out your airbrush between color changes? I have a spray bottle. I will spray the color out. If there's still a lot of color in there, I'll spray it out into my little water well and then just run clean water through the airbrush. I also use, where is it? This one by Createx, this airbrush cleaner, I use that through my airbrush to help clean it as well. But ideally, I don't put too much paint in the well, so I don't have to feed a lot of excess paint in there. But yeah, that's how I do that. Mara Black says, I'm only seeing the back leg of the animal's legs, so am I seeing this correctly? Well, this is a grass and flower tutorial, so yes, you are. This isn't on the deer itself. I mean, it's the deer painting, but we're not painting the deer tonight. Meets Art Gallery says, does it matter if I use Walmart branded acrylic paints and canvases? If yes, what difference does it make? Yes, it does, because you're not going to get the same result. When you're first starting, I'm not sure how much you'll notice of that, but it's a pretty big difference. Like if I were to paint the 2, yes, I can paint something and call it kind of pretty, but I can't glaze the same. So a lot of different cheap acrylics will lift. They don't allow you to glaze. And the funny thing is, I use Liquitex Basics. They're not a terribly expensive acrylic paint. It's not that you have to get the most expensive out there. You just need to get one that is a decent quality. So yeah, big difference. The canvas is what you'll see an even bigger difference, I think, on. The Walmart type canvases, I've had students show up to classes with those before. Their texture is horrible. They kind of absorb the paint weird, even though they're already gessoed. And I've tried gessoing to save them. They're just, I don't know what it is about those. They're horrible to work on. They're extremely rough. So if you're trying to get detail like what I'm doing here, they're not going to work very well for you. So you end up spending a lot of your time fighting the canvas instead of accomplishing, learning and painting, which is not the most ideal situation. Rachel says, I'm being accepted into an organization called Regional Fine Arts and signed up for oil painting. Time to start binge watching your videos. Any tips on starting? I'm new to oils. The big thing with oils, I think, is learning when to let them dry in between layers. It's the same basically as acrylic. You just have a longer dry period in between all of these layers. So if you can teach yourself when you want to let things dry. I need a bigger brush. This is going to take too long. Thought that one was big enough. It is not. But if you can let yourself, or kind of figure out when to let things dry, that will be the biggest difference. The main complaint people have, or artists have, when they're working with oils is that they create mud. Well, the reason that they're creating mud is that they're not letting the paint dry in between layers. That's an issue. So if you can let it dry and do a lot of the glazing, that will help with that. I mean, there are painting techniques like what Bob Ross does where everything's done wet into wet. It doesn't give you as much depth as what you can get if you glaze. So that would be my big tip there, is to pay attention to, if you've painted with acrylics before, if you've painted with anything else, where you would let acrylics dry is where you're going to want to let the oils dry. Samila Rain says, what about my social media growth? Should I start offering merchandise like prints? You can offer prints. The nice thing with prints, if you go with something like Fine Art America, depending on where you're located, they've got places in the UK, I know, they do ship overseas, or they have locations overseas. But if you can do something like that, I like that because it doesn't cost you a lot up front. When I first started selling prints, I was getting them made through Vistaprint. I had to front the money up, in the beginning. I didn't have the money for that. So that was really a challenge for me to offer prints because I had to buy the print in the first place. And their quality wasn't always the best. Some small stuff was fine. That's mostly what I sold, were smaller prints, because their big stuff looked terrible. But, it doesn't cost you anything to do up front. As long as, I forget how many you're able to have for free with Fine Art America. I know I pay something like $35 a year and it gives me a full website. It's not a real website. Don't be fooled by that. It's just a site where you can have more prints available. But for me, it's been worth it. I just got a check from them for this last month. It was like $117. It's not going to pay your bills, but it is a nice additional little bit of extra income, and I don't have to do any work. All I have to do is upload the image. They print it, they ship it. If someone has to return it because it was damaged, whatever, they deal with it. I don't have time to deal with that sort of thing anyway. So it works out really well for me. I'm still a huge fan. I know someone, actually, I just had a question about that on one of my videos earlier. I am still a huge fan of Fine Art America for doing prints. You will make more if you can if you're printing them yourself, or having them printed and you're shipping them yourself, yeah, you'll probably make a bit more than what I make. But as far as time goes, this is a better option for me because I don't have time otherwise. Michelle Lynn's Fine Art says, what brand of gesso do you use? I use Liquitex. I've always had really good results with theirs. So what I'm doing here is blocking in the darks, but you can see how I'm leaving some areas a little bit lighter. I'm using a little bit more water. Some areas are much darker. This just kind of gives me a general idea of where things are going to go. The lighter areas are where my flowers are going to be, whereas the darker areas are where the deepest shadows are. And if they're in the wrong place, it doesn't matter. No one's going to know. Well, actually, being that this is on Pixabay, a lot of people will know the difference, but as far as buyers who aren't looking on Pixabay, no one's going to know the difference. But I've got to get these darks in here so that the lights will really pop out. How can you compare, let's see. Abinayu says, how can I compare two brushes just by touching and seeing, not using them? Experience, honestly, there's not some magical, like, I can look at the brush and know that it's going to be perfect if you haven't used a brush like that in the past, which basically means you're going to end up using some brushes that you hate in order to get that, develop that skill of knowing what type of brush you want to use. If you're using oil or acrylic, you know you're going to want a brush that is not too floppy. Like watercolor, you can use brushes that will completely bend over a little too much. Whereas with oil and acrylic, you want something that's going to be a little bit more stiff. But besides that, it's experience. So much of everything is going to come down to experience. And I think, especially if you're a newer artist, don't be afraid of making mistakes. It's something that I see or read questions all the time where artists aren't even experiencing anything because they're looking for answers first. Well, those answers aren't going to make sense to you if you've not experienced the medium yet. Try it. If it doesn't work, then you have something very specific to look up and to ask another artist, okay, this is what happened to me. Why did this happen? But if you've not experienced it, then you're not really going to learn. You're not going to progress very far. What do I need? Roseanne says, what do you think about painting something imaginative? Well, it depends on what you mean. I mean, technically, this would be considered imaginism, or this is going to be surreal because he'll have light bulbs on his antlers. This is not, I'm not painting something that necessarily actually exists. This deer was never in this location and definitely didn't have light bulbs attached to his antlers. So, I mean, I paint things that this is what my imagination sees when I considered this background, or actually I picked this background to go with the deer. I picked the deer first and needed to find something to look at. So while, yeah, I'm looking at something, it's also not a complete copy. I'm changing the way my grass is a bit. I'm changing my flowers. I'm changing everything a bit. So, I mean, based on that, I like things that use your imagination, but I still use reference photos. I mean, I have a painting over here that has several planets, a tree that's wrapped around the earth, a butterfly on that, light bulbs. There's all kinds of different things, but I used a reference photo for every single element. I just combined several elements. It depends on what end result you want. If you want your work to look remotely realistic, then you're going to find reference photos. It doesn't mean you have to copy those reference photos exactly, but it does mean you need something to look at if you want to make sure that tree looks like an actual tree and not a child's drawing. Eduardo says, can you do a figure drawing soon? I'm in figure drawing class and I just need some tips. You're going to get more tips from that from your class. I don't do figure drawings. I do portraits. I don't do like the sketching or the line drawings or practice that much at this point anymore. So you're not going to see videos of that. I like to do the completed portrait. So I won't be too much help there for you. You may want to check out, I think Mark Crilly, I think I'm saying that wrong now, and Leonardo from Fine Art Tips. Both of them do a lot of drawing, like the initial base drawing videos that I think could help you out a lot. Now, all of this will need a little bit more detail than what I've got. I'm going to, I think, leave it about like that now. Just need to darken some of these still. The areas that I want the black to be really translucent, I'm still adding water, but I'm switching over to ivory black because the ivory black is going to be your translucent black. I mean, what I'm doing is making sure I keep that upper line fairly soft so I'm not fighting that later on. So you can see now, as I add more color or darken some of this up, I can still see the light area underneath. I can still see where I want those light flowers to be. And this is, again, the ivory black, so I'm going to see through that a bit anyway. Okay, you can let that dry, and then I can start in on the grass and the flowers a bit more. Mara says, are you doing a bit of brushing or am I just hearing your brush on the canvas? of dry brushing. You're hearing the brush on the canvas. There's actually a fair amount of water on most of this. I did dry brush on some of the rocks. There are times that I will do a little bit of dry brushing, but I'm scraping the brush. There's water on it, but I'm also pushing pretty hard and kind of jamming it into the canvas. Okay, back to, let's use this guy. So I'm going to be using my hooker green mixed with a bit of my Naples yellow just to start blocking in where some of these grassy areas go. A lot of this is going to get covered when I come back through with the flowers. I'm just blocking it in so that it's easy for me to judge where those flowers go. Kind of like a little road map. Yeah, and Mara, the microphone is right next to where I'm working, so you're going to hear more than you normally would. This canvas is huge, so everything's kind of jammed really close together. Meets Art Gallery says, is selling your paintings on your own website a good way to sell paintings, and is there a better way to sell paintings? When I started, I couldn't get people to go to my website. I mean, trying to get the traffic to your site is the challenge. So you can put, I mean, you have that build it and they will come mantra that people talk about. That's not how things work. Build it, yeah, have it there. Let people be able to buy them on your website, but I would also throw them on eBay. If you really want to sell the artwork, get those up on eBay or websites that have more search engine power and are going to be seen more. I mean, heck, I was looking for a very specific pair of shoes because the place that I wanted them didn't have them in my size, and now they're not in season because they're boots, so the whole thing. So I started looking online. I did a search for that boot. I found it on eBay. If that person had it on their website, I never would have seen it because it wouldn't have come up on the search engine. eBay's going to come up on the searches much faster, much sooner than your own website will. So like with me, I have a lot of original paintings on my website. I need to update those or add more, but I've got a lot of them on my website. If I was serious about like really wanted to get those sold now, I put them on there, but if they sell, they sell. I'm not gonna, that's not where my focus is right now. I'm more focused on the video aspect of things. But if that was what I was really, really focused on right now, I would throw those on eBay as well so that I would get that search engine power. And the nice thing with putting it on eBay is if you've got your logo, your brand name, people may do a search for that and then come up with your website too. So it gets more traffic to your website. But yeah, eBay I think will help you a lot more if you're really trying to get them sold, but still put them on your site. It's not that that's a bad thing, but that's probably not where the majority of your sales are going to come from until people really learn who you are and start doing searches for your name. This brush that I'm using right now is a Simply Simmons brush. I am becoming a bigger and bigger fan of theirs all the time. These are brushes that I got from Smart Art Box. I've since bought a few myself because I love, like, they're just such a perfect spring to the bristles. They work so well for so many different things I need. So now every time I come across more, I think you can get them at Michael's. I've gotten some online from Dick Blick. I want to say it was Dick Blick, maybe been Jerry's, I don't remember. But oh, how I love these brushes. So right now what I'm going to do is start filling in or blocking in where some of these little flowers are going to go. And I'm starting with the dark first. I'm going to do this the same way that I do trees or bushes, where I start with my darkest color and then I slowly build up to my lightest highlights. But I don't want to, it's not like a paint by number situation. You just put the right color in the right place. I've got to layer this in order to get the look that I want. And then I'll end up probably doing some glazing to tint all of the colors and pull them together later. Missed some questions here. Linda says, how did your show go last week? You were missed here. Oh, thanks. It was amazing. It was one of the most, I don't know, exciting, I guess, times or things that I've done in my art career. To be able to talk to that many art manufacturers, and when, I mean, you talk about how many subscribers you have, that people watch your stuff, they're interested. So, I mean, I've got different companies. I'll probably be doing some reviews of the watercolor pencils from Faber-Castell, from Karen Josh. I talked to them. I've got some more canvases. I'll be working more with doing a convention with Fredrix. So you get a lot of opportunities to talk to the manufacturers, and it's a good relationship building thing, I think, because you can pick and choose. I mean, I'm not going to go and talk to a manufacturer who makes supplies who I wouldn't recommend, because I'm not going to promote stuff to you guys that I don't personally want myself. So it was really nice to be able to go through, try stuff, talk to them. Like I talked to Golden's acrylic paint, had some questions answered, things that I didn't have any idea about, which was really exciting for me. So that was really cool. And the other really cool thing is I'm now allowed to tell you guys that big secret Inktense project that I've kind of alluded to on some of the Patreon videos, and I think I've mentioned it here on the live streams. I'm going to have my artwork on the new Inktense box tins for Derwent. I got to see those printed for the first time while I was there, which was really exciting. I can't show you photos of those until they're officially released, but oh, I'm excited about it. So yes, on the Inktense blocks and tins, I will have 2 different paintings on both of those, which is extra exciting because those are carried in most art supply stores. So when you guys go in there, you can say, hey, I know her, which is exciting. So yeah, it was a great trip. And I will be hopefully reviewing some more supplies for you in the very near future. Let's see. Scrolling to get back to more of these questions. Megan says, do you use the same Liquitex gesso for oil paintings as well? Yes, I do. Mara says, do you find, whoops, scrolling weird. Mara says, do you find the blackish underpainting better than dark green for prepping the grass? Yeah, I do. Well, sometimes I'll go with dark green, but for this one, most of what I need is actually black, so that's why I'm going with black. But there are times when I'll go with a super dark green instead. It just depends on what it is. There's never, when you're working in art, there's never really any time where it's, this is always how I do this. This is always how I do that. It depends on the situation. You need to adapt your technique, adapt how you're working based on what it is you're actually doing. But don't get too caught up in, I did it once this way, this is how I'm always going to do it. It will always, I mean, every situation is going to be different. Now the thing here, I don't want this to look like little polka dots. I need variation. So you can see I'm using different pressure on the brush. Some areas I'm pushing harder where I want it to be thicker. Some areas I'm barely touching where I want it to be tiny little lines. Nicholas Edgar asks, I'm going to start calling Nick. Now I'm going to call you Nicole because I just made that mistake. Nick Edgar asks, how big is this canvas? It is a 24 by 36 inch. Eric Draws, okay, I think I missed your question, Eric, so I'm going to skip that. Let's see. Mara Black says, is this going to be a hill? Huh? I'm confused by that question. I'm guessing no? Nicholas Edgar says, wow, now I know I want to get, or sorry, Nicole Edgar, because that's what I'm going to call you now. Well, I want to get a new set of Inktense. Anthony says, have you ever tried Winsor & Newton Galleria Acrylics, Caran d'Ache Pablo colored pencils? The Pablo colored pencils, yes, and I have talked about them in my videos. That's one of the pencil types I want to review that I talked to Caran d'Ache about. And for the Winsor & Newton Galleria Acrylics, I think I have one here somewhere, like one tube. I don't use them because they have more gloss than what works for my technique. I like my paint to be a bit more matte, and then I'll put a gloss finish over it when I'm done. But it's not one that I personally use. Not that it's bad, it's just for my techniques and the way that I work, it's not my go-to paint. Meets Art Gallery says, how to minimize the muddy look in your painting? Well, what's causing the muddy look? There are different things that can cause it. You're probably either using too many colors, you're not letting it dry. Are you working in oils or acrylics? Definitely would need more information to be able to answer that. Because, like I said, several different things can cause that to happen. Mara, if you want to see, when you asked if this was a hill, I have a feeling if you look over at Instagram at what this looks like so far, I think that'll give you a better idea of what this painting is of. I was just looking at buying a set of Inktense. I'll wait and go with your artwork on it. Yeah, I cannot wait for those boxes to come out. I am so framing those. I'm putting those in a shadow box. Melissa says, I'm having a hard time adjusting to the polychromos. I'm not sure what it is. I haven't tried blending with OMS, but I'm not sure how much it will help me. Well, I don't blend without them, either that or powder blender, so I can't really offer you any advice. I know of plenty of artists who blend and just do a lot of layering without OMS, but that's not how I work, so I can't really give you much advice as far as that goes. I have a video, if you look up 7 mistakes beginner colored pencil artists make, that may give you some answers. You see I'm being very sloppy, very messy. The big thing though, when I start to get that dry brush look, it's very important for me to reload the brush. One mistake that a lot of people make when they're painting with either oils or acrylics is they don't have enough paint on that brush. When you start getting the dry brush, those little dots of the previous layer showing through, just like in that rough textured look, pretty much good indication you need more paint and or water, mixing medium, whatever you're using on that brush. Don't be afraid to use that paint. Now, I don't like a lot of texture where you feel it and you can feel the ridges of the paint. I don't mean that you need texture that or so much paint that you're, building that much texture, but you want enough that you don't have the texture of the canvas showing through. Meets Art Gallery said, what did you use to draw your deer and the other outlines? A white charcoal pencil. One by Generals. I don't know if I have it up here right now. But yeah, here it is. These, oh, it doesn't have its label. I've used it, so I've had these for so many years and I only use them for the outlines, but this works really well over the acrylics, and this is why I want my acrylics to be a flat. If I were using a higher gloss acrylic paint, this pencil won't show up over it, and because of the way that I draw, the way that I layer, and using the airbrush, this works. This is why I like the Liquitex Basics so much. People are always asking me, why do you use those? Is it because they're cheap? No, it's because I like how they work. I like the finish they have. Although I got some tips. I'm going to try something to see if I can get other acrylics to flatten out a bit. I'll let you know how that goes. I had some tips while I was at that art show from Golden's, which I will share after I've tried it. Don Hill says, I bought the large polychromos tin for $72. That's awesome. That's a really good deal. Where did you get that? I think I paid almost $200 for mine. That was years ago. Well worth it, though. Make sure you guys are highlighting the Lachri fine art. You can see how a lot of people are doing, where it highlights in that bright orange so that I can see it. If it's not highlighted, I'm probably not going to notice the question because of the way that the conversation scrolls. I'm much more likely to see it if you've highlighted it. Otherwise, I just assume you guys are talking amongst yourselves. So the two colors I'm mixing for this are my red and my violet color to get this deeper burgundy. And this is an area I do not care if this is exact to the reference photo at all. Like there's no reason for me to spend a bunch of time making it exact, every little flower the same. It doesn't matter to me. Oh, nice. Don Hill said she got the polychromos at Michael's online with a 60% off coupon. That is amazing. I wouldn't have thought to go online to order. That's pretty smart. Now, I forget that you can buy stuff online from Michael's and Hobby Lobby now. I looked before. My Hobby Lobby had clearanced out a bunch of their Winsor & Newton, like everyone did, the Winsor & Newton pigment markers. And so I was like, well, I'll go and buy some on there. No matter how much I put in my cart, there was never free shipping. I'm like, no one pays shipping anymore. That's ridiculous. Include that in your price of your stuff. So I didn't order because of that. I know that it's like this psychological thing. What difference does it make? It's the same in the end. But no, I don't. I'm not paying shipping. I buy enough art supplies that I don't have to pay shipping so on places. I mean, like Jerry's, Dick Blick, I never pay shipping on those because I'll just make a big order. So I did not place that order. Linda says, how do you highlight in another color on here? This is not like working in colored pencil where it's hard to get lights to go on top of darks. What I'll do is mix in a little bit of either unbleached titanium white or titanium white with this same color to lighten it a little bit. And then I'll add more of that color for the next layer. I'll continuously light it up or lighten it. The unbleached titanium white and titanium white are both very, very opaque colors. So it will completely cover what I've done here. And I'm even going to come back through with darks too. I'm not going to just leave it as this being the darkest. I will darken up even more a little bit after I get more of this blocked in. Lee says, I have trouble blending acrylic paint. It always dries too quickly. How can I blend it like with oil paint? Get an airbrush. You can get a single action hobby kit airbrush. Badger makes one. And mist it to keep it wet. Mist water. And I'll always have people say, well, can't I just use a spray bottle like this thing? No, because the water droplets are too big. You will completely not have the best results. I'll use something like that when I used to paint murals. Then it was fine because big water droplets didn't matter. But on a canvas, you notice them. It kind of lifts off when you go to blend with the blending brushes. So the airbrush is the way to go. For me, I just use my normal, my Iwata or my Tamiya, I don't know how to say it. One of those. But you can get the single action to keep it wet. You can keep it wet for hours if you want to. I've done that before on really elaborate skies. You just keep misting water as long as you need it to. And the next question I know someone's going to ask is, what about the slow drying mediums? The mediums to make the paint dry slower. They make the paint gunky and it gives it a terrible texture, and I absolutely passionately hate those. So I don't ever use those types of mediums, the slow drying mediums, in with my acrylics. Airbrush with water works better. Meets Art Gallery says, is it a bad idea to paint over your painting that didn't turn out the way you want to with white and then paint over it again after it dries? No, people do that all the time. Usually they'll use gesso to paint over it, but no, that you can absolutely paint over it if you've, and I've done that before. Usually you're going to see a little bit of the previous painting underneath, but that really just gives you a little bit more depth, a little bit more texture. It actually works. So no, there's nothing wrong with doing that. Marilyn wants to know where the reference photo is from pixabay.com. You can just look it up there. I didn't post it anywhere. And the deer, which you can't really see on this one, is from wildlifereferencephotos.com. Rachel wants to know the difference between wax and oil-based colored pencils. So this is a funny thing. A lot of the manufacturers seem to be moving away from using the term wax and oil-based. Well, not all of them. Faber-Castell and Caran d'Ache seem to be telling people, oh, they're not wax, they're not oil, they're all. Some are saying that things are wax that have traditionally been called oil. They're all kinds of confused. Now they're saying they're clay-based, they're this. They've all got elements of all of these different ingredients in them. So what I'm going to answer is based on how we've traditionally looked at them and why we separate them into whatever. But they all have wax in them. It's a matter of how much wax versus how much oil. The oil-based pencils like the polychromos are going to be a little bit more translucent. You're not going to have the wax buildup like you do with, say, Prismacolor. The wax-based pencils like Luminance, Prismacolor being one, though anything that has more wax, that's going to be a more opaque pencil. The Derwent drawing pencils, those are going to be much, much more opaque. So for me, I like those when I'm doing something that I need really soft, like skin tones. And for something that I want fine detail, which is going to keep a sharper point, it's not going to break as easily, I'm going to go with the oil-based pencil like the Polychromos. Anna wants to see my reference photo at the moment. No, because I don't have it here. You have to go to Pixabay. It's not on this computer, so there's nothing I can show you right now. Mara wants to know how my color for these flowers is so opaque. You are like the queen tonight of asking questions I don't know how to answer. um, well, it's not really opaque. It's semi-translucent the way the light is shining through it. It's just the colors that I'm using. I will tell you the colors I'm using, though. That may help. I am using the Liquitex Deep Violet and Liquitex Cadmium Red Deep Hue together. These colors are not exactly what you would think they would be. And let me show you really quick. If I were to paint over white, oh, come on, paper. If I paint over white, the color is not the same as what you're seeing here. It's not that they're opaque. It's up against the dark, so they're looking very dark, but it's definitely not an opaque color. It's very different. If it was opaque, this is the color that it would look like on top of the black. This is just giving me a consistent color that I think is making you think that it's opaque. I don't know if that helps at all. Andrew wants to know if I've ever used cold pressed ground before. No, I have not. One thing I'm going to do just to lift some of these chunks of paint off is just go over with this, not because I'm trying to blend it. I just don't want big, thick chunks of that acrylic, which I am getting. I don't want a bunch of texture on there, so that'll kind of smear it around. Michael says, is it possible to get rid of wax bloom without odorless spirit? Not really. I mean, you can kind of rub it off with a cloth, but that blends things. It causes its own set of issues. You can spray a fixative over it to prevent it from continuing to bloom, but while you're working, not really. I'm also, as far as the opacity of this color, I'm not using a ton of water in with it. The more water you use, the more translucent it will be. And again, these are very translucent colors anyway. I think it just looks opaque because it's consistent. The one I start with pretty much looks like like a children's drawing. Like it doesn't look remotely realistic. There's no depth. There's no there's no highlighting at all. This is all going to come. Come on, why did my computer screen just go out? There it goes. It was weird. One went out and one stayed on. That shouldn't have happened. But I don't even know what my point was there. Oh, this is just a layering process. The first few layers are going to be very, very ugly. That is normal. Michael wants to know if it is possible for me to do a guide on the Derwent artist range. Maybe. I may end up doing a review on those at some point. I know I'm going to do the full Derwent drawing range. Those I love. So I'll be getting a full set of those soon. JPC13 Art says, can the brush and pencil texture fixative be used on traditional colored pencil projects not done without a blender? As far as I know, yeah. It's only going to add so much texture, so it's not going to be the same because it's kind of one of those in combination with the type of paper you're using and everything else. But as far as I know, you can. Double check, though. Contact them through their website and ask. But I don't see why you wouldn't be able to. Mara Black says, have you ever done an acrylic underpainting on canvas, then used colored pencils on top? Would this work? I have not. It could work, but the canvas and the tooth, and there's a difference in that and how I would seal or varnish it, all of that, it's not my choice. It can be done, but it's not a way that I personally choose to work just because I don't like that combination. I mean, I don't know why I would, because I can get the fine detail with acrylic paint. Like, I don't see a reason to go on top with colored pencil. That seems like it would just make more work for myself. Rachel wants to know if I have ever finished a piece that included mermaids. Yes, I used to do them a lot. I have several older ones. Nothing on my website, I don't think, though. Okay, I am going to come back through now. I'm going to use a stiff brush. Where are they? I need to start getting some of these greens in here. And I'm just going to use a bit of green with, let's see if that's going to be, yeah, that color will work. I want to create some texture underneath some of these. Now, if I were going for photorealism for this, I would sit here and do all of this with a liner brush and take my time for every little thing. But that's not what I'm going for here. So you need to kind of know what your goal is before you start as to which type of brush and which type of technique you're going to do. The brushes that I'm using here will give me a semi-realistic look, but it will not be totally photorealistic. If I want to do that, then I've got to switch to liners and do the little teeny tiny detailing, which I will come back through on some of this. I'll sort of be somewhere in between, but... Meets Art Gallery says, what do you think the biggest problem with beginner artists? What is the biggest problem? I'm thinking you mean for beginner artists or with beginner artists? With seems like, well, they've got a bad attitude. For beginner artists may be a totally different question, so I'm going to go with that one. And no, I'm not saying beginner artists all have bad attitudes. Gosh, what would be the biggest? I think, honestly, for a lot of beginner artists, I know for me, I'll speak from my own experience. I had a hard time getting the supplies that I wanted. I didn't have the money for them. So having to work the part-time, well, eventually a full-time job in order to earn the money to get the supplies and figuring out which supplies to use for me was a real challenge. There was no YouTube. There were no reviews where I could easily figure out what was the right medium, what was the right whatever. So I kind of wasted a fair amount of money on stuff that did not work for what my goals were. So that was definitely a challenge or a problem for me. And again, not having YouTube at all, I didn't have anyone to teach me. I had to learn how to do everything on my own. So that was an additional challenge. Just figuring out technique, though. I think for a lot of artists too, especially when they're starting, they expect their work when they first start out to be what somebody who's been doing it for 20 years is completing. It doesn't work that way. It takes time to learn those techniques. That unrealistic expectation, I would say, is a big problem for a lot of young artists or a lot of new artists. That looks terrible. Michael says, is the Derwent artist range one you would suggest, or is Inktense better? Those are two totally different things. The Derwent artists are colored pencils. They're like a wax-based pencil. They're not super creamy. They're kind of a harder pencil, okay for fine detail. I've not used them that much, so I can't give you a full review on them. I'm just going from memory the few times I've tested them. But I don't like this brush. This is not working for me. Inktense are water-soluble ink. They're not both colored pencils. I mean, they're both color in pencil form, but it's completely different. I can't even remotely begin to compare the two. He says, have you ever felt pressure to make abstract art? What do you think about abstract contemporary art? I've never felt pressure for it because it's not something that ever interested me that much, so it's not something I ever paid much attention to. I mean, you'll always get artists who say one form isn't real art. You know, realism, that's not real art. And then you'll have other artists say abstract, that's not real art. So no matter which style you choose, you're going to have someone that tries to tell you that's not real art. No, I've never felt pressure. I just never had interest. I mean, it's kind of like I've never felt pressure to be a doctor. It's not something I was ever interested in becoming. So not sure how to answer that well. What do I think of abstract and contemporary? I'm glad that there are lots and lots of different styles of art. I'm not one who thinks that there's only one right way to create, only one right good way. I've seen contemporary and abstract that I liked, and I've seen lots that I didn't like. Just like I've seen realism that I liked and realism that I disliked. So it's just not one that I'm personally terribly interested in, but I don't think that it means one way is better than the other. But no, I've never felt pressure whatsoever in any way to create it myself. Mara says, I'm seeing pink in the foliage in the blurry background. Are you going to pull that into the foreground too? What kind of flower is the pink? I don't know what kind of flower it is. It's something wild. Yes, I will be lightening these up quite a bit. And I wish you could see, if you go to Instagram, you can see this photo, what I posted last night. It'll give you a better idea of what this side is going to look like. Bigelow Fine Art says, I saw how you determine your original prices, but how do you determine your prices for prints? Is it a percentage of the original? I don't know. I just figure, okay, for this size, I want $30. I put that, and it gets marked up on Fine Art America. My prints are very expensive compared to what they recommend them to be on Fine Art America, but I'm also the only place you get my prints, so that makes a difference. There's no necessarily rhyme or reason other than for this size, I want $30. For this size, I want $20. For this size, I didn't come up with anything super crazy on that. It's just the same no matter what size it is across the board, just the way I have my Fine Art America set up. So like, and I'm throwing that $30 price out there. I don't even remember what I have them marked. I'd have to go look at my paperwork. But I just put what I want per size on all of that, what I think is fair. Meets Art Gallery says, is there an alternative to an airbrush? Well, no. I mean, an airbrush is going to give you a very specific look that another medium isn't going to look exactly the same. That doesn't mean you can't imitate it, but it's still not the same. So I don't want to... when you say alternative for what? It depends, I think, on what you're trying to get it to do. There just are things that an airbrush can do that other mediums aren't going to do as well or the same. Let's see. Christy says, beside yourself, can you recommend other graphite artists that have a great YouTube channel with tutorials or online blog? Not off the top of my head. You probably just do a search for graphite tutorial on YouTube, and whatever artwork you're impressed with, kind of go by that. I don't myself watch a ton of YouTube. I don't have time. I'm too busy making videos myself. So I don't know all of the artists out there, unfortunately. I wish I had more time to watch them. Don Hill said, have you noticed the art professors always know what area... Wait, what? Have you noticed that art professors always know what area you took art classes by your shading style? I didn't go to art school, so I can't even remotely comment on that. I have not worked with art professors. So what I'm doing right now really is just building texture. It doesn't need to be exact. I just need the texture in there to build from. Again, this side is very ugly right now, and there's not an easy way for me to show you what this is going to look like, so you can check that out on Instagram. Titan says, what would you recommend to start off at, acrylics or oils? Which one did you first use? I started with acrylics because I had never used oils before. I had the opportunity to play with acrylics when I was in high school, and so that's what I wanted. That's where I started. Acrylics are harder to learn to blend than oils. If you can blend acrylics and you understand when to let paint dry, when you switch to oils, it'll be easy. The challenge I had when I switched to oils for me was knowing when to let it dry. But that is something that I was able to, once I figured that out, then oils were much easier. And it's like when I teach, oils are easier for me to teach in general. There are always exceptions, but normally oils are going to be easier for me to teach than acrylics are. Just because many students get very frustrated with the dry time, with how fast acrylics dry. I'm going to go ahead and add a bit of unbleached titanium white and start getting some of these highlights on here. Now, when I come on top with the highlights, my goal is not to cover up all of the paint that I previously put on there. I need some of that to show too. I want to make sure I'm seeing both colors. Doug says, I notice you use Liquitex Basics with good results. I've been told not to use less expensive acrylics, but I wonder how they really compare to artist quality. They are artist quality. The difference is that they are going to have more binder basically in them, so they're a little bit thinner. They dry more flat than some of the others. Like if you go to Liquitex Soft Body, you've got a very similar, I think, texture, but they have a little bit more gloss. They don't work as well for me, although I may try some paintings with them because I keep buying more and more of the Soft Body. it's not that they're a lower quality. That is definitely a misconception. Just because they're less expensive in this case, it does not mean lower quality. They are a very high quality. They are they are fine for professionals. It just depends on the techniques that you're painting in, how you're going to use them, as would determine if they're going to be the right paint for you. But I see that a lot where people are like, oh, it's Liquitex Basics, it's a student grade. Well, no, it doesn't mean that they're not good. They just have more binder. They're not as highly pigmented, but because of the way I layer, because of the way I glaze, that's perfect for me. Meets Art Gallery says, how do I advertise my art somewhere besides on the internet? You can advertise in magazines, but you've got to figure out who your target market is. It depends on what kind of art you're producing. Let's say you draw photos of babies. It doesn't make sense, you're trying to get commissions for kids or kids art. That doesn't make sense for you to advertise then in an artist magazine, because people who are buying portraits are not going to be the people who paint portraits, who are the people who buy that magazine. You've got to figure out who your target market is. Who is it that you're trying to sell that artwork to, and where are they hanging out? Let's say you paint pet portraits. In that case, if you're trying to get commissions for pet portraits, showing your work or buying a booth or renting a booth out at a dog show is going to hit your target market, because those are people who love dogs, who want paintings of their dogs. That's who your target market is. So it really isn't so much where do I advertise, but who am I selling to? Where do those people spend time? A lot of dog show people, your dog shows is a good way to go. If you paint kids, then figuring out where mommy groups are, or maybe host a painting event for the kids, or a mom and child, mommy and me, that's the type of word I'm looking for, class, and potentially advertise that you do paintings or portraits there too. I mean, it comes down to figuring out who you're selling to and where they spend time. But just ads like Facebook ads, all that, those I don't think are that, again, depending on what you're doing, usually for most people don't find them to be that beneficial. Very, very few people who I know of ran advertisements like that and got the results they were looking for. It's not that it can't happen, it depends on who your target is. Scrolling up. Anna says, how do you choose which technique you are going to paint an artwork? Do you decide first the technique or the reference photo and sketches? The reference photo and sketches, and then I just figure out, okay, how am I best going to achieve the look I'm going for this? JPC13 Art wants to know when the new Inktense tins with my artwork will be out. I would like to know that myself. I forgot to ask them that. I don't think they know for sure yet. But I forgot to ask. I meant to ask that while I was working at that convention. So I have no idea. I was half asleep through most of that convention. So that's why I was actually home in time. I could have done the live stream. I was just too tired. So that is why I was not here last week. This will tell you how tired I was. So you guys know, well, most of you know, I'm pretty nocturnal. I usually am up painting until 3, 4 in the morning, and then I sleep and about 8 hours from then. So I had to be up at 3 in the morning, which meant I got an hour of sleep. I was not able to, I went to bed at 9 a.m. or 9 p.m. to try to get sleep, but my body's not used to that. So I got an hour of sleep. My flight left at 6 a.m. So I had to be at the airport, and that's exhausting anyway. So I got to Salt Lake City at 8 a.m., went straight to the convention center, and worked until 5. So I'm running on no sleep. I don't handle no sleep well. One of the joys, I guess, of the fibromyalgia crap, where I'm always so tired. So actually be tired like a normal person would be tired on no sleep, combined with how tired I always am anyway, it was a bad combination. So I get back to my hotel, where I'm going to dinner with some of the people from Derwent. And they're waiting for me in the hotel, but we were with Derwent McPherson's. It's a huge, there were just so many people. There must have been 30 different people there. Well, I don't recognize people at the best of times. I don't remember names, and I don't recognize people. So I had 2 people who were waiting for me to go ahead and drop off my bags at the hotel so we could then go to the restaurant. But this hotel was so packed with everyone from the convention. I mean, there were like hundreds of people there. There was a waiting line like I've never seen just to get into the elevator to go up to your room. So the whole thing took forever. By the time I get back downstairs, I can't find the people who I'm with, who I'm waiting for. And again, I am running on no sleep, which does not work well with me. And I go up to somebody. Now, most of the guys there seem to be wearing light colored shirts, button up shirts, and all had short brown hair and beards. I think they all looked like, at this point, being delirious, pretty much everyone looks the same to me. So I go up to a guy and I'm like, okay, I'm going to just have to embarrass myself and ask, are you the group I'm supposed to be going to dinner with? The guy goes, yeah, sure, let's go. So I follow this group about 3 blocks away. We're walking. And I'm like, this doesn't seem right, because they were talking to me way more before. We were having more conversation, and now it's like really awkward. No, it wasn't the right people. These were perfect strangers who were like, yeah, let's go. They were there for a different convention. I'm like, you guys are kind of jerks right now. And a part of it's my own fault because I don't recognize people. I was tired, and yes, I followed people far away. And at this point, it's starting to snow when I had to get back to I had to use my GPS to just figure out how to get to the right restaurant. Yeah, I felt pretty stupid, but I was so tired. It was like, whatever. This is a story I shouldn't tell people because it's actually kind of embarrassing. Who follows the wrong group of people 3 blocks away to the wrong restaurant? Oh, Kaneho's here. Kaneho's not actual. Okay, Kaneho is a troll, but he's our friendly neighborhood troll. He's actually he's commenting every rude comment people normally make to me, because I always get complaints about my voice and how fast I talk, that I talk too much, that I'm annoying. I hear these complaints a lot. Kaneho's just repeating them, but he's actually a friend. Eduardo wants to know if I've ever tried Conte crayons. Yes, and they are not my preference. I had a hard time working with them, so it's not one that you'll probably see me use much, except occasionally Smart Art Box will send random things like that. But they're not my preference. I can't get them to work well. I've seen amazing artwork done with them. I was just not one of those artists. Chen says, ignore the troll, you're wonderful. Yeah, he's not really a troll. He is, but he's not. He's a friend who's a troll. Our friendly neighborhood troll. Doug says I should be painting right now, but I can't get motivated to get off the couch, and this painting is looking really cool. Thanks. Paint while you watch. It's like an art club. We'll all paint. Have you guys ever done that? I used to do this years and years ago, back when I lived in California. Monday nights, my friends would come over and paint. They just play with my art supplies, bring their own art supplies. We would just all hang out and paint. It was a lot of fun. And none of them were actually artists. It was just a fun thing to do. Phyllis says, sounds like something I might do. Emmy says, it might be embarrassing, but at least others can learn from it. It was an interesting short story. I don't know if it was short. My stories are rarely short. I always preface my stories to my friends that I'm going to try to keep my stories as short as possible. And they're just like, no, you're not. I can't tell a short story. So yeah, basically, I need a babysitter. I should not be allowed to wander around by myself. It actually made me nervous walking around. It was downtown Salt Lake City, so it's actually not like a terrible neighborhood or anything. But I was nervous walking around because I'm used to having pepper spray or my stun gun with me, and not being by myself and not having those was a little bit nervous. Like, there were a couple guys that I was by myself with on a street, and that made me nervous. They were like picking stuff up off the floor. I'm like, oh my gosh, this is not the best situation. Tanya says, what is the difference between Liquitex Basic and Heavy Body? Heavy Body are very thick. So let's say you wanted to paint with like a palette knife. Those are a great paint for that. When I paint more impressionistic, I love the Heavy Bodied. They have a higher gloss. So that's my biggest issue with them. It's not even an issue. It's just why they don't work as well for like this type of technique. These flow better. They give me the results. This is the Liquitex Basics. They give me more of the results that I'm looking for. They just work very, very well for my techniques, and they have a more matte finish. So as you can see, part of the deer's leg back here, where the white charcoal pencil shows up really, really well. Hit another one over here. When I use the white charcoal pencil, you can see how well that shows up. Over a high gloss paint, it doesn't show up very well at all, if at all. So for me, because of the way that I layer, and you can see how I layered the background and then I drew out the deer, the paint that is going to be much more matte is my choice. The other thing, the Liquitex Heavy Body dry much faster than, like when I put them out on my palette and I'm mixing water with them, they dry a lot faster than the Liquitex Basics. The Liquitex Basics stay wet and ready to use for a very long time, whereas the Heavy Body, I have to be careful not to put too much out because no matter how much I put out, they're going to dry very quickly. Krista says, what do you use for graphite charcoal pieces to set it so that it doesn't smudge? By the way, you're always amazing. Thank you. I have a spray by Krylon, and I want to try some higher end, I guess, finishes that I just haven't yet, but I just use a spray finish for those. And then I frame them because no matter what you spray over them, they're still going to smudge a bit. Like I wouldn't just hang them without putting them behind glass. Emily says, if it makes you feel better, Gary Larson, the cartoonist, tells a story in one of his books about the time he got in the wrong car at an event and almost drove off with random fans. That is awesome. TT says, I'm sorry my question was too long or inappropriate. I think you may have skipped over it. I skipped over it because you're not highlighting my name, so I didn't see it. So I'm not sure what your question was. Rachel says, what are your tips for using a palette knife? Whoops, just scroll through that to paint a majority of your piece. If working in acrylic, well, with oil, if you use too much with a palette knife, it tends to, you can end up creating mud. So you want to make sure you let it set, you can let it dry. Just be aware of what colors you're putting where. If it dries really slow with oils or acrylics, but I mean, especially so with oils. So when you're painting with that palette knife, you've got to know what colors you're planning to go where and have a bit of a plan for that because it's really easy, I think, to create mud if you're not paying attention. That paint is going to be on there so thick and take so long to dry. With acrylics, it's going to dry a bit faster, but you also want to make sure that you don't thin it too much with water when you're painting really thick like that. Like if I put something thin on top with water, you can crack, the paint will get these cracks in it. So just be aware of that too. Let it dry on its own. Like if I take a hairdryer to it even, sometimes that can cause it to crack just because it's drying unevenly and it is so thick. When I paint like this where it's really smooth, I can use a hairdryer all I want. It's no problem. But with really thick acrylic paint, that can cause issues of when it dries and how it dries. So that's just something to be aware of. Let's see, were there more parts of that question? Let's see. Yeah, I think just having a plan is a good way to go. I've done quite a few, especially with oils. And I like painting with the palette knife. It uses a lot of paint. Don't try, when you are painting with the palette knife, don't try to make the paint last a long time. Glop that on there. I've seen where artists will have just, a teeny tiny bit and they're trying to do these little areas and it's like, it doesn't work right. You have to get thick paint on there to really have the palette knife work well for you, whether it be oil or acrylic. Mara says, should the Liquitex Basics pour out of a tube like almost milk, or did I get a bad tube? This is my titanium white. Like milk? No, definitely not. This is the, actually let me move this because all my paintbrushes are going to roll away. You can kind of see how this is what the Liquitex Basics looks like. They're not really moving. They're pretty thick. Not as thick as Heavy Body, but yeah, if they're pouring out, there's something wrong. I would return that tube. Remember, if you want me to see your question, make sure you're highlighting, doing the @Lachri Fine Art. Otherwise, I'm not going to see it. I'll assume you guys are just talking amongst yourselves. It's not that I'm trying to be rude and ignore you. I just don't see the questions. Yeah, like Rachel showed there. She's got it highlighted. That is what I will notice more often than not. And if I miss your question, I'm not trying to. Even if it is highlighted, sometimes it'll scroll by before I catch it. Now notice that I'm doing these flowers in clumps and clusters. It's not just random polka dots everywhere. That won't look right. Whoops, that's not supposed to happen. We'll have to work over that. I'm grouping and overlapping these. Very important in getting something that looks natural and not like polka dots. I think one of the biggest mistakes that I see artists who are new to creating bushes, flowers, the leaves like this where they're clumped together, is that they just do random polka dots everywhere. Don't do polka dots. Tanya says, if I don't have a hairdryer to help dry the acrylic paint, would a heat gun on the lowest setting work, or would this be too much heat? Too much heat. It is a good way to crack the paint and cause a lot of problems. It kind of makes it bubble. So no, use a hairdryer or just let it air dry. I would not recommend ever using, and I know some artists do. It is too easy to really screw up the painting, and once that happens, it's all over. So you don't want to have spent 10 hours on something and then forget, not pay enough attention, and have it get too hot and bubble the paint. Rachel says, when you buy Mona Lisa stuff, how much in ounces do you buy? I ordered a 32 ounce, but I think it's way too much. I've got a gallon sitting over here that's going to last me the rest of my life. So yeah, a very little amount goes a very long way. Andrew says, how do you stop procrastinating? For me, one of the best things that I've done was start this YouTube channel and commit myself to one new painting every single week. Now, if a painting like this one, there is a chance that I'm not going to finish this in the first week, and so I may separate this into 2 weeks, 1 week the deer, 1 week the background. We'll see. I'm going to try to get it done, but I'm also not going to rush it and make something that looks terrible just because I wanted to get it done in that week. But for the most part, I mean, I've got to have a new video up every week, so that means I've got to get this done. And I've got other things, I've got to work on the Patreon postcards. The January postcards I want to go out tomorrow, so I've got to label those tonight. I've got a lot of work to get done. I give myself deadlines. I think that is a really important thing, and I need to give my Patreon postcards a sooner deadline because I'm always late on those. But giving yourself a deadline, I think, is a really important thing to do as an artist, because I don't know, most artists I know, and myself included, we tend to be a little bit flaky, a little bit flighty, like, not in the mood for that. I'm going to go do this right now. And again, I'm talking about most, there's always going to be exceptions, but it seems like we are easily distracted. We will jump from, I'm interested in this right now. No, I'm interested in this. No, I just want to watch TV. Having that deadline for me was a must. There are too many other things that I will think, oh, I want to do this instead today. No, I need to get work done. This is my job, and I have to get work done. You have to look at it as a job, assuming you're not just doing it as a hobby. If you're just doing it as a hobby, it doesn't matter. Do it when it makes you happy. But if you're trying to make a living out of it, you're going to need to have work done on a schedule, on a regular basis. So having those deadlines is a really, really big deal, and making yourself stick to those deadlines. Scrolling and asking some of these questions. Eric Draw says, which site is better, Etsy or Fine Art America, and why? Well, they're not even close to being the same. One is a website that sells prints, and one is a website where you sell original artwork. You can sell prints off that, but it's not even, you can't really compare the two. They're not the same. If you make a painting, you can sell original paintings off Fine Art America, but they're not buying it through there. They have to contact you and then make arrangements to buy it. It's not where you typically sell your original art. It's for selling prints. Versus Etsy, you can sell all of your original stuff or old stuff or whatever. So they're definitely not even close to being the same. It's comparing apples and oranges, I guess. By the way, oranges are better. Deborah says, what is the quickest time you've known someone to begin selling their art? I'm over 65 and way too old to be hoping to be good enough to sell someday. I know an artist, Wendy Lane's a good example of this. Wendy Lane jumped into art, and I mean, within a year, she was basically a full-time artist. It depends on your marketing strategy, I would guess, but I know of so many artists who started when they retired from whatever their previous job had been and became professional artists from there. So 65 is not too late. You will have plenty of time. That's, I've known of people who within a year they were able to do it. Now, that's not necessarily the norm. It depends on what choices and what moves you make to get there. I mean, there's a lot of factors involved, but I would not jump to the conclusion that it can't be done by any means. I've seen it done. And I have seen so many artists who did not start painting until they had retired. So no, you're fine. Anna says, I'm studying fine arts at university. I do have classes tomorrow morning, so I should be sleeping, but I find this much more interesting than the actual class. Thank you. You were funny. Lachri, the glare on the brushstroke makes it hard to see the painting detail, especially when trying to take a photo, even without a flash. Do you have any suggestions? Yes. Well, the type of paint you use makes a difference. It's a way, like my oil paintings, I hate having to photograph in oil because of the reflection. I hate having to photograph a dark colored painting in general, like this area, if I try to get photos of this right now, it looks terrible. Actually, when I was getting the other side of it last night, you have to play around with different lighting. Ideally, you want your light source to be at about 45-degree angle, a 45-degree angle. English is apparently hard for me right now, from the painting. So if your painting is here, you want the light coming this way. Don't have the light coming this way or this way. Have it come at that 45-degree angle. That's going to help reduce some of the glare. You just have to keep trying different light sources and position the canvas in different ways in relation to that light source to get that photo. Scrolling through, a bunch of questions came through. I think I'm missing here. Mara said, do you think 40 plus hours is too long to complete a painting? 11 by 14 and 2 animals. Well, what do you mean by too long? It depends on what your goals are. For me, yeah, 40 hours would be an insane amount of time. A 14 by, like in acrylic, a 14 by 11 by 14 inch painting would probably take me about 8 hours. 8 to 10 max. I paint abnormally fast. Not everyone's going to paint that fast. That doesn't mean I'm better than somebody else or they're better than me or because they spent longer, theirs is better. Everyone's going to paint at a different speed. So I can't say one is too long or one is too slow. For me, it would be too long. That would mean I'm screwing around and playing too much of my Frozen Freefall Disney game on my phone instead of painting. That might be a problem right now. But for another artist, that may have been them working efficiently the whole time. There's no one right or wrong, this is how long a painting should take. It depends on the artist. I mean, I've seen artists who have painted things and said, hey, this took me over 100 hours. And it's like this big, a drawing of a dog. And I'm like, one of two things is happening. Either one, you are a liar, or two, you are working so slow that you will never be able to make a living, which is your goal at art, because 100 hours on something that small, you're not going to be, no one's going to pay how much you would need to make to spend that much time on a painting or drawing. So you've got to factor that in too, I think, a little bit, if you're spending too long on stuff that's not important, because that drawing, the one that I'm thinking of, I'm like, that wasn't any better than the same artist work who spent, when that artist had spent 10 hours. I'm not sure where did those other 90 hours come from. So you do have to keep stuff like that in mind. I mean, I think you need to figure out how to work efficiently, not necessarily rush. But if you're spending 100 hours on something that no one, you can't, if you were working minimum wage 100 hours, how much would you make? A lot more than what somebody's going to pay for that painting. So I think you have to consider that as far as if you're trying to make a living off something. If you're doing it as a hobby, it does not matter one bit how long you spend on something. You take your time, enjoy the process. So that is going to be a factor, I think, too. But I have seen where artists spend so long, and I don't know what they're fussing over in the work, but I think that they tend to waste time because, like I said, it was no better than that same artist's work that spent 10 hours on something. So just working efficiently and being aware of how much time you're spending on something. Was it worth it? Was me spending 10 hours on one eye worth it? Does it look better than when I spent an hour on that eye? Those are things I think to consider. Let's see. Megan says, I know you deal with fibromyalgia and other health issues. Do you have any suggestions on how to remain motivated when dealing with physical and or mental illness? I don't know. It kind of goes back to setting goals with time management. I set goals for myself. There were things that I wanted to do, and I'll reward myself with things like, because of how many hours I work, and it's an insane amount of hours, especially for someone with fibromyalgia. I work a lot of hours. I reward myself. I look at the positives in my life because of that. The money that I've made or that I'm able to make because of how hard I'm working now. Now, I worked many years with those hours and not made money, but I'll kind of reward myself like, okay, I'm buying a new pair of boots or a new pair of shoes, which is extra exciting for me because for so long I had like 2 pairs of shoes. I had my tennis shoes and I had flip-flops, and that was about it. So for me now to be able to go, okay, I'm going to get a new pair of shoes, not because I need them, but because it's fun. And in 2 weeks, I'm buying this pair that I'm really excited about. And that motivates me. That works for me. That's not going to work for everybody. I think you have to figure out what works for you. I play these little mind games with myself. If I get this done, then I can have this item. I'm going to work really hard and I'm going to get this set of pencils that I didn't really want to splurge on before. That sort of thing works for me. It's not going to work for everybody. And controlling my diet makes a big difference. For me, I know that if I eat like crap, like I had macaroni and cheese for breakfast, probably going to have some pain in my back and my knees later on because of it. Was not the wisest choice. It sounded good. But when I start having problems for me, because I know that so much of my health issues can be controlled with diet, when I start having pain, I know, okay, I need to get this under control again. I need to start eating healthy. I did have a salad for dinner, so I'm getting back on the healthy track. But I think that makes a little bit of a difference too. I had a harder time before I knew what was wrong, before I had the fibromyalgia diagnosis, and then even after knowing what was wrong, before I knew how to control it with diet. The only thing I really struggle with now, if I eat healthy, is I'm always tired. That never got better. But the pain I can completely control with my diet. So that is made it different for me. I think, like, looking back before I knew that, I had a much harder time getting myself to do anything. I had a hard time getting up because I didn't know why I didn't feel good. I didn't know that macaroni and cheese is what made me so sick. Or made the pain so bad. So I definitely can relate to having the struggles with that. But setting goals was the biggest difference for me. Part of that was setting goals on what I was going to eat that day, that I was not going to have carbs until next Sunday. I could have some French fries next Sunday, but I'm not having them until then. Except for today where I cheated and had macaroni and cheese. But it was gluten-free macaroni and cheese, so it won't make me sick in the celiac side, but it will with the carb side. So, but the goal setting that I was going to get a new video done every week, that I felt like people would know or call me out on, I didn't get this week's video done. And even now, gosh, I didn't have a live stream last week and I had tons of messages from people wanting to know what was going on. That helps you keep motivated. When you kind of commit to something, you let people know, I will have a video done, I will have a painting done this time next week. That was a big motivation for me. It didn't matter if I was sick. It still doesn't matter if I'm sick. I was sick last week on top of being tired. I still had to get my work done. Well, minus the live stream. So yeah, set those goals. Rachel says, whoops, I just scrolled right past a bunch of questions. Where did that go? Whoops. And thank you guys for submitting all of these questions. It makes this a lot of fun. Rachel says, a requirement for joining the Regional Fine Art, I have to collect an art portfolio. Not sure what type of pieces to put in it. I'm going into oil painting, but I have no oil examples. We need to get started on that. I think it's my only answer there. I don't know what they're looking for, so I can't say as far as that goes. Different groups prefer different things. Some people want realism. Some people want more, looser, more impressionistic type style. I don't know what they're looking for. I would talk to somebody who's in that group about that, but it sounds like you need to get started either way. Sonia says, do you ever have use a wet palette? No, I just work on the foil. It works better for me. I've seen the wet palettes. The paint, like I've known where people put paper towel down first. The paint doesn't blend right. I can't get my colors mixed quite right when I've worked that way. So I've yet to use a wet palette, whether it be my own or a student's, that worked for how I paint. I can't say that they're wrong. They just don't work for me. Mara Black says, I can't hear baby chicken and I have my volume turned up so loud I can't even hear my husband talking to me. Where's the chicken? He is in his cage right now. I know it sounds so mean, but I wasn't sure if I was going to be airbrushing and I don't want to risk his little chicken life. Would not be good for him to be breathing in airbrush paint. Scrolling through more of these questions. Valerie says, though it does depend on the type of media, 100 hours for me is a 16 by 20 is understandable. Yeah, that definitely depends on the medium as well. I mean, acrylics, I'm going to spit out really, really quickly versus, gosh, I can't even imagine how long something like this in colored pencil would take. A long time. Not as bad if I used powder blender, but I mean, either way, it's going to be long because you're talking about a pencil with a tiny point trying to fill in all that surface area versus I can use large brushes for bigger areas. So that will make a difference too. But like I said, it's not that one is necessarily, or that if someone paints faster, they're better, but you do have to be able to produce a certain amount of work in order to stay relevant. So if you are spending 10 hours on a teeny tiny eye, and it doesn't look any better than someone who's spending an hour on that eye, that may be something to consider. Okay, what am I doing that I could maybe speed this up a little bit? And again, I don't mean to rush your work. It depends on the situation. Stephanie says, have you managed to use any other watercolor pencils? What are your thoughts? Not yet. I've only even gotten to use my Derwent ones once or twice. Twice? I need to play with those more. I got my sketchbook that I'm all excited to work in, and I got really busy and really tired between being sick and then traveling last week. It takes me a long time to recover because of the fibromyalgia after traveling at all. Vacations for me don't make me feel rest. That wasn't a vacation, but like even when I will go on vacation in September to visit my parents, I don't feel rested. I feel exhausted when I come back, and it takes me a couple weeks to get to where I feel normal again. So, yeah, I have not been able to play with them much at all, unfortunately. I'll be fixing that next week. Whoops, I just scrolled past some questions. Scrolling again. I've seen water. Elt says I've seen water. English. I've seen people water down their acrylics to create pouring mediums instead of using pouring medium. Wouldn't this cause underbinding of the paint? No. Okay. It depends. Depends on the type of paint you're using, first of all. If you're using a cheap acrylic, that may crack. You may have issues with that. I use Liquitex Basics. Never had a problem with it. And you can see, I don't have it in here, but there's a flamingo painting that I did this on. I've done this on several of them, where you get a similar look to pouring medium. Done this several times. Once you varnish that, it is not coming off. It is fine. It's not going to be a problem. There's a video here on YouTube somebody made talking about the danger and don't use too much water and don't use water, use mixing mediums because it underbinds your paint. It was kind of a scare tactic type video to get views, and then they disabled comments because those of us who use water and know that that is not necessarily. She's giving some facts, but not all the facts in that. So it creates this kind of, people were freaking out about it, and I kept getting messages about it. I have a video talking about it, about why it's fine. Once you put a varnish over it, that paint isn't moving. Now, yes, the more water you use, the less adhesive it is. So if I were to do that and take a scrubby brush and scrub over something that I've watered down severely, yeah, that can cause the paint to lift. But I'm not going to do that over an area that I did that. And once I varnish, it's fine. It's on there. It's not coming off. So yeah, if you look at my video, look at Lachri and is it okay to add water to acrylics, that I go a little bit further into that. But no, it works fine once it's varnished. And the type of paints you use will make a difference. Stacey Anderson says, I'm starting my colored pencil for the first time and tracing the macaw off my monitor with brightness turned all the way up. And I still can't see the feathers to trace. Suggestions. When I trace things out, I don't need to trace every little detail. I get as much as I can. Turn off the lights in your room, by the way. If you don't have every light in your room off, there's problem number one, because I've seen people do that a lot and then not understand why they couldn't see stuff. But sometimes the paper's too thick and you won't see through it very well. If you can see the general outline of the bird, you can go through in freehand. You have to remember, the point of tracing isn't to just trace things and not have to learn how to draw. You have to learn how to draw because there's situations like this will come up. You need to be able to freehand in those feathers that you weren't able to see. If you can see where the general line of the beak goes, the wing goes, that the eye is, those sort of the big block things, the big important things, get those exact and then freehand in the feathers. And the feathers don't have to be exact as long as they're close. No one's going to know the difference. So yeah, just freehand those in as you need to. If you've got the main outline of the macaw, that's the hard part. That keeps your proportion in. Go ahead and try freehanding those feathers. I'm going to add a bit of titanium white now to this mixture. I'm going to lighten it up quite a bit for my next layer of highlights. Haley says, I'm painting an eye in art class and I'm having trouble on drawing the eyelashes. Do you have any tips? Yes. Don't draw too many. Less is more. People want to draw eyelashes like they'll do, actually, let me see. Do I have a pen or something I can use over here? I don't really have anything that works. They'll do eyelashes where, actually, I could use a different brush. 1 second. Let me find the brush I need. People want to, even when drawing, they'll do eyelashes. So here's your eye. And they draw a caterpillar. That's not going to look like an eyelash. That looks like a caterpillar. Instead, when you draw your eyelashes, if you're going for something more realistic, so here's your eye. Just a few, actually this line is too thick. Let me get some of that off there. Just a few, and see how it's thicker and then it thins out. And they're slightly curved and they're going to slightly overlap. Those ones are too thick. Go buy these ones. I had too much paint on my thing. I needed a pencil for this, but that is even too much. Look how many I have in there. That's probably more than you need. Look at a reference photo. And if you're not using a reference photo, find one. Look at how many eyelashes are actually there. You don't need very many. Biggest problem I see people make is putting too many, overdoing them and making them really thick. Whoops, just scrolled past more questions. Go back. If you guys have not already, make sure you check out Valerie and Joseph Fincham's. They both have art channels here on YouTube with videos that are really cool. I've got links to their videos in the description, and also thank you guys so much for helping. I could not do this without them helping moderate this. Josephine says, how long did it take for you to be diagnosed with fibromyalgia? I have to get tested, and I'm worried about being in and out of the doctor's office. It was a long process for me because I've been at the doctor since I was a kid. I've always had health problems. Oh, I need more white on that. That does not stand out enough. I had celiac disease, but we didn't know it. So I was sick all the time. I had no immune system, basically, or a very bad immune system. I shouldn't say no. But I was sick a lot because of that. So I was in the doctor's office all the time. I mean, my whole life I've been dealing with not feeling well. So once I was, because of, again, with the celiac disease, still didn't know, when I was, how old was I? 17. I got strep throat, scarlet fever, and mono at the same time. I drank out of a girl's cup at my work who had mono. Well, because my immune system being so bad, I also got strep throat and scarlet fever along with the mono. So that seemed to be the turning point that made the fibromyalgia. Fibromyalgia has a tendency to have like a trigger. Sometimes someone will be in a car accident and that will trigger like some major health event that causes the issue. And so for me, that seemed to be when I never really felt right. I felt worse than normal. I'd always felt bad, but that really made a difference for me. So I was 17 at the time. I did not get the diagnosis for fibromyalgia till I was about 32, 31, 32, right around there. And I was in and out of the doctor constantly, and it finally got to a point where they put me on medication, and then I'd go through withdrawal when I stopped taking that medication because it didn't work. And I finally got to a point where I just didn't really trust Western medicine anymore. I was like, I'm not going through this again. You can only go through withdrawals, and I've never done drugs. So to go through drug withdrawals as many times as I have was like, this is ridiculous. So I stopped going until I started having more severe symptoms, and I thought something more serious might be wrong. So I went ahead and went in, and then that's when they I did several tests. Once I went in that time, it maybe took 2 months for the actual diagnosis. But it was nice because it gave me an answer. I mean, all those years, I didn't know why all of the pain and the nausea, I had no idea why. And so it was a relief. It was I'm glad that I did it because it gave me answers, and it gave me something to look up. If I wouldn't have known that, I wouldn't have looked up dietary changes that would make a difference for me. I wouldn't have known how to change my diet for that. And I never took medication for it. Medication for fibromyalgia, I don't necessarily agree with in most cases because fibromyalgia seems to be a hypersensitivity to everything unnatural. What are the pain medications? Things that are unnatural. So I don't think that some people say that they work, and if they want, everyone's got to make their own choices. For me, I decided not to. And I control my pain completely based on diet, just avoiding things that are unnatural and carbs, not like this morning's macaroni and cheese, but I'll know why everything hurts later because of eating that. So it's not as worrisome as it used to be when I didn't know why everything was hurting. Mara says, would you do a blurry background the same way you would do a blurry background? Wait, what? Would you do a blurry foreground in the same way you would do a blurry background just in reverse? Or is there a different technique? Yeah, I would do it. It's the same way. I think I'm caught up on questions. So I've switched to a liner brush. This is a number 2, I think. Where is the number? This has no number. Oh, it's a number 1. Synthetic hog-haired liner brush. And I'm just kind of scribbling these little shapes for some of the highlights on the tops of the lightest pink. And again, I'm not covering all the light, dark and medium pinks. I want both in there. And that was too light. I've got to cover some of that. And I will end up coming, and you'll see this on the video next week once I'm finished with the flowers. I will come back through and transition between the blurry and the in focus better. Right now it's too harsh. I will basically start adding detail as I work my way back a little bit more than what I have now. I'm also going to take some white and soften out that background so it's even here, so it's a bit more foggy. Flag says, diagnosed with fibro in 77 from a car accident. Just found a holistic doctor last week who taught me diet and still learning. He does acupuncture and treats celiac. Yeah, I see I don't think it's holistic. He does nutritional testing? I forget what it's called. But yeah, that's who I see now when I need to go to a doctor, is the natural doctor. I've had way better results with him for treating the fibro than I did Western medicine. Way better. Like night and day. I feel so much better than I did. He also was able to treat me. I have hyperthyroid, so he treats me for that and all that fun stuff. Rise wants to know if I read Court of Thorns and Roses by Sarah M. Maas. Not yet. So here, I'm getting a little bit too solid. I'm going to come back through with darks and cover some of that up later. I'm just going to work my way back and forth. So this is still kind of a very loose blocking in of color. I will refine all of this as I work my way through. I'll probably end up painting on this until about 4 this morning. I'm not as far along as I would like to be. I wanted to paint all day yesterday and all day the day before. And last night, my husband decided I needed to go to the store anyway to get Claritin, allergy season, yay. But he was on this wild search for what are they? The Wii game, the Nintendo Switch game thing. I don't know. He's searching for some little characters for that. So he had to go to every Target and Walmart that was open. He found one of what he was looking for. But I did not get nearly as much painting done last night. So I'm going to be up really late working on this. No, see right here how I'm pulling this down? This is wrong. I need to break this up because I'm screwing up my perspective having this long curve come down. This isn't going to look right. So I'll come back through with darks later on just to keep my perspective. When you are painting something that's a landscape, you want to try to keep a lot of stuff in this kind of horizontal line. Well, yes, I'm going to have curves here. I don't want something coming down almost vertically like this. This is a weird shape. I need to break that up with some of the darker greens and blacks. Dennis wants to know if I bought the full set of Derwent drawing colored pencils. No, not yet. And actually, I won't buy those. Will be given. I'll get those from Derwent. If I do a review on them, they are perfectly happy to give me anything that you guys want to see a review on. So I will be getting those. But I have used several of the colors now, and oh, they're amazing. So I'm excited to get the full. I don't know why I don't have the full set, because now the 2 colors I've tried, the white I've loved forever. So I don't know why I never considered the rest of the colors, and they're all light fast too. There's not very many colors, but I definitely want to add that to my collection. They are wonderful. Very, very creamy, very good for when you want a very opaque, like a large blurry background. I think they're going to work great for. Nameless Winter says, can you use real hairbrushes for acrylic? Real hairbrushes for acrylics, or would the synthetic be better? Personal preference. I don't have any real ones, I don't think. I think all of mine are synthetic. But there are plenty of artists who do use real hair. It just depends on what you're looking for and the type of hair, because there's lots of different types available. The synthetic, I believe, is a bit cheaper. Probably quite a bit cheaper. Emmy says it's amiibos. Yeah, that's what he's looking for. He's kind of obsessed with finding them right now. Just kind of getting these different shapes. And again, notice they're not polka dots. They're kind of almost scribbles. But when it all builds up, it's going to come together to look more realistic. And this, what you're seeing tonight, won't be even close to done. I mean, I've got so many layers to do on this. So you'll see more of this next week. But making sure that you're keeping things in clumps, that is so, so important. And do at least minimum 3 different layers. My dark, medium, and light. Whether I'm doing bushes, trees, or flowers, this type of flower, that's how I'm going to build those up. Palav says, which eraser is better for detail work? Pencil eraser or Tombow Mono? Tombow Mono is my preference. Pencil eraser, I mean, they're both technically, if you mean on the back end of a regular pencil, like a pink eraser, I never use that on my artwork, ever, because the pink can come off onto your work. White erasers are all safe. It's all pretty much the same unless you get into like the ink erasers. I like the Tombow Mono Eraser for getting detail. It's really easy to control. That or one of the electric erasers. Those are a little bit harder for students to get the hang of. But they work really, really well once you do. I know I'm asked a lot about keeping a good posture. That was a question I want to say the last time we were doing a live stream. Keeping a good good posture while you work. I got a new stool. It's just a round stool, cushion pad. This is helping me so much keep my posture better. There's not really much to slouch on, so I'm gonna throw that out there for anyone who has asked that before. Working on a stool instead of a chair that has a back is, for me, I mean, everyone's back is going to be different, so what works best for your back is not necessarily the same. But as far as keeping a good posture, getting rid of the back on that chair has done such a difference, and my back definitely has felt better since I switched chairs. Kitty Cat's Attack says, do you have an Instagram? I need tips for fur. Can you do a live stream about that? I do have Instagram. It's below in the video description. Tips on fur. I mean, any videos, if you watch the way that I layer them, it will depend on the medium that you're looking for, but I have tons of videos on fur. So you can look up any of the animals, I've got like, gosh, over 700 videos here on YouTube, so you'll have to dig for it, but lots of different animal tutorials that should give you some tips. I mean, it's not something where I can just give you answers. You have to experience it. You have to practice. You're going to do some things that look not like fur, but that's how you're going to learn. Work slowly and don't try to find shortcuts, I think would be my biggest tip. Look at your reference photo. Copy what you see. So when I glaze, I'm going to keep layering like this. And what I'll do is end up glazing over all of these colors. And it's going to mute my light colors. It'll just bring the light and the darks together. It'll give me a much more natural feel. Barbara Lovelace says, hello, all hello. Lisa, my powder blender kit comes tomorrow and I am way too excited. That's cool. You will have fun. Just remember, my biggest tip on that, there's a learning curve. Don't expect it to behave just like how your colored pencils traditionally have. You're going to do a lot of layering and make sure you're working on either sanded or gessoed paper in order to get the best results. But those are it is one of my favorite ways to work with colored pencil. The more I use it, the more I love it. The first couple of times I used it, it was like, oh, I'm terrible at this. It was easier to work my other way. But the more I'm using it now, oh my gosh, that stuff is wonderful. It just takes some getting used to. Tanya says, is there any of the luminance colored pencil you do not use due to light fast? No, luminance, all of them are light fast. Every single luminance colored pencil is light fast. That's like the whole thing with them, is that every pencil in that set is light fast. Funny Dude said, I noticed some oil painters use acrylics for their underpainting. Why is that? Because it goes faster. I do that too. It makes the whole process, oil is a slow medium. So if I can do an underpainting, block everything in with acrylics, I mean, that saves me days worth of dry time. So yeah, no, it's a really good way to go. And you can get really great depth that way, where you're doing a lot of the glazing. You just glaze the oil over. I love the results I get when I mix those two. Remember that oil can go over acrylics. Acrylics cannot go over oil. I mean, they can, but they won't be archival. They won't stick long term. Barbara Lovelace says, I had the most difficult time locating sanded papers. Do you have, or sketchbooks? Ampersand is expensive. I have 2 types of sanded paper board to play with before starting something serious. Yeah, it's definitely fun and definitely play around. I tried my first project. I was like, okay, I always, whenever I do something, I try something that's a little bit more serious than I probably should when I'm learning a new medium. And I did that, and I didn't have the paper prepared properly. I wasn't using gessoed paper. I was like, oh no, it'll be fine. No, it was not fine. So my next project was when I actually tried something that worked. I did the chickadee, which was much more simple than what my original design was going to be. Mazzito says, hey Lisa, how many hours a day do you advise an amateur put in to progress quickly without burnout? That's going to vary from person to person. I don't think there's any real way to say 8 hours, 10, as many as you can. There are tips I can give you to avoid burnout, but listening to audiobooks would be one of my biggest tips. You don't feel necessarily like you're working the whole time, or have a movie playing in the room where you are. But, it depends on how bad you want it. I mean, the more you work, the faster you are going to progress. And it's kind of funny with art. I think that a lot of time, like let's say you're going to school to be a doctor. You are going to work your butt off for 8 years or longer, depending on what you're going into. And then even more once you actually start working. I mean, the amount of work that goes into becoming a professional of something is insane. But artists have a tendency to think that they can half do it, that I can work when I'm in the mood, when I'm not burned out. You think doctors don't ever get burnt out? No, I'm sure they get burnt out constantly. The amount of work gone into to learn, just even the schooling alone is insane. For some reason, as artists, we don't take it that serious. We expect to make a lot of money. We expect to be successful. We expect to be amazing. But half do it. We don't want to have to work hard to do it. We just want it to kind of happen. And that's ridiculous to me. It's the one profession that cracks me up when I watch how, and even myself when I first started. It's like, oh, I'm going to go hang out with my friends. I'm going to go to the beach. I'm going to do this or that. I'm not going to work because I'm not in the mood. I don't want to get burnt. You know what? You're going to have burnout. You have to accept that, and you have to work through it. If you are trying to make a living at it, if you are just trying to become really good and it's a hobby, then it doesn't matter, work when you want. But if you are trying to make a living of this, you're going to get burnout. Accept it and work through it. That's just how work goes. That's how being an adult works. Any other profession, the amount of school involved is insane. But for some reason, artists are like, yeah, I'm fine. I can half do it. And I expect to be well paid, and then I'm going to complain because I'm not making any money, and then I'm going to fall into but they're starving artists. Artists don't make money till they're dead. That's not true. That is an absolute myth. But the problem is that artists are half doing it, that we're not being serious enough, and it is so typical. So I say, accept the burnout. Work your butt off if this is what you want. If you want to make a living at this anytime in the near future, work harder. I mean, if I would give myself advice, looking at back as a younger artist, if I could show myself where I could get if I had worked harder earlier on, oh my gosh, that would have made a big difference for me. But I think you need to first realize you can accomplish a lot as an artist. And all of those people, for whatever reason, a lot of people will try to discourage artists. And, you're never going to make a living. You're not going to be able to buy a house. You're not going to be able to do this. You're not going to be able to do that. You're going to be living off top ramen for the rest of your life. Those things aren't necessarily true if you work for it. And that's really going to be the truth with any profession. It's just that artists seem to think that we can be lazy and still succeed, and it doesn't work. The burnout is to be expected. Let's see. Scrolling. Barbara Lovelace says, your opinion, best location for sanded papers or brands? Didn't you use sanded Fredrix boards? No, my favorite right now are from proartpanels.com. I got mounted sanded, Fisher 400 is my absolute favorite. And I got mine from proartpanels.com. GSAT wants to know what my favorite art store is. Oh, that's hard. Depends on what I'm going for. If I want to buy canvas, Azel Art Supply here in Texas. If I'm buying just about anything else, I usually will first check Dick Blick online. If they don't have it, then I'll check Jerry's. But those are probably my main go-to stores. I can usually get everything I want from those ones. Okay, let's see. Scrolling up. Emmy says, I forgot, what age did you start as art as a profession? I was 19 when I decided that this is what I wanted to do for a living. So I started very young, and that was way before YouTube, way before, I mean, really anyone had websites. That was, what was that, 1998, no, before that, 97, 96. I don't know, I don't math. But it was a very long time ago. So there wasn't a lot of resources out there for me. I didn't know what I was doing other than, oh, if I'm in the mood to paint, I'm going to paint. That's kind of what I did. And part of the reason it took so long, I got involved in some local art galleries and did stuff like that. But I mean, looking back, I definitely could have worked a lot harder. I could have done a lot more a lot sooner. Now, yeah, I wasn't going to, make it on YouTube sooner, or, well, I could have sooner than what I did. But I mean, that was before, there was no YouTube. There was nothing, social media did not exist. The ways that we make money now, or the way that we get known now as an artist, they hadn't been invented when I started with art. So it was a slower process than it would have to be for any of you guys by far. Barbara Level says, proartpanels.com, Fisher 400. Correct. Just no spaces between those. And I get the ones that are mounted so that it's actually on board already. It doesn't bend. It's really nice to work on it. You can pay a little bit more for it, and you can mount your own. I prefer to have someone else do it so it's done correctly and saves me time. Let's see. Dawn says, the big thing now is art therapy and psychology. It's a new thing in the discipline. I actually knew a lady who was working. She was going to get her degree. She was working with troubled teenagers and doing art therapy. It was really cool what she did. I got to go meet some of the kids she worked with once. It was, or the location she was teaching at. It was really fun. Glenn says, how do you get inspiration for your work? Greetings from Belgium. Oh, you're far away from me. The internet is so amazing. How do I get inspiration? In this case, I had a photo. I went through my reference photos that I had purchased from Wildlife Reference Photos. I found this deer and thought, hey, what can I paint with him? I want a cool background, and I knew I wanted to play with my airbrush. So I just went on Pixabay and looked for reference photos that I liked, backgrounds that I could kind of base mine off of. I'm not going exact. I just wanted something kind of close. So that is how I got this one, but it depends on what it is. There's times where I will be like halfway between awake and asleep, that just in between stage when you're falling asleep, and I've gotten a lot of my ideas then, like random things that'll pop through my head, like, oh, I can make a painting out of that. Sometimes it's just a photo that I see that I want to recreate, like this deer, and I just wanted to give him a different background. Palev says, do you have any artist whose art you envy? Not like in a bad way. I love John By fine art. He is one that I love. Oh, Jason Morgan. Jason Morgan, I was a total fangirl of. So when I started talking to him, we did some collaborations. I was really excited because I have always just loved his work. So I'm a big fan of. Brian Holland. Oh, I love his style so much. Love how he paints. So those are some of my favorites. I mean, I have other favorites. I just can't think of them off the top of my head. Petty Dude says, do you purposely set time aside to play with a new medium or technique? How much time? Normally, I just create a project. I just am like, okay, I'm making a video out of this, and whatever happens, happens, and you guys get to come along for the ride. But normally, that's how I paint. However, with watercolor, it's a little bit different because I'm playing with those watercolor pencils, and I do not know what I'm doing. I want to do a few experiments first. In the sketchbook, and then I will, and that's just whenever I can come up with time. It's not like I set time aside. It's like, okay, I've got a free few minutes to play, so I'm going to paint now with those. Mizzino says, do you think making art for specific niches is ultimately limiting your art diversity as is a worthy trade-off? Exclusive horse painters. Here's the thing. If you can paint one thing well, you can probably paint anything well. I always have people go, well, I've painted a corgi. Well, can you paint a chihuahua? why wouldn't I? If I can paint, I can paint. So if somebody were to come and ask me for something specific, even if I specialized in one thing, I don't think it necessarily limits as far as that goes. However, I do know people who are like, I'm only going to be a bird artist. I'm only going to be a wildlife artist. To me, that just doesn't interest me. But if that interests those artists, then why not? Go ahead and let that be your thing. I don't see anything wrong with it, but I also don't see that there's a huge necessarily benefit in only doing that. Now, jumping all over the board a little too much could be a problem. I mean, somebody who paints, let's say, houses is not going to appeal to the same person who wants flowers, or maybe they will, I don't know. Those maybe aren't as far apart as I think they are. So you may have different styles a little much on that, but I don't know. For me, I like to always experiment with things. So there was a time when I only painted marine life. That's all I did. And I eventually got bored with it. And so I expanded what I do. I don't know that I'd say one is right or one is wrong. I mean, it's good to have a group of people that you can target that love everything that you create. And if that's what you enjoy doing, I don't think it hurts you. I think it's important for the artist to work in a manner that is something that interests them, that is something that they love, because I think that that's what shows in their work. I think people who are like, okay, I think landscapes are popular, so all I'm going to paint are landscapes. I think that shows in their work, and I think that that can hurt them. I think that you want to paint something that you're passionate about, that you're excited about. That's what's going to make the best art. Connie says, I live in New Zealand where we don't have most of the supplies that you use. Is it better to practice with junky stuff if that's all you can get, or does that create bad habits? Use what you can get. I mean, no matter what, use what you can get. And chances are you've got different brands that are decent, just not the same as what I use. But I would never tell someone, well, if you can't buy the good pencils, just don't bother drawing. You're not going to get the same results that I do using, Crayola versus polychromos, but that doesn't mean that you shouldn't create. You should always create. You're going to be making things a little harder on yourself in many cases if you're using lesser quality materials, because they don't do the same thing. So that may get frustrating for you, but I don't know that it necessarily creates bad habits by any means. Mara says, because of the time spent doing art, how do you have time for friends and family? Do they get upset because of neglect? I married the perfect person for me who likes to spend a lot of time playing video games. So he is perfectly happy on his own while I am in here working. That works out really well. And we recently changed our schedule because he's now working 10-hour shifts and has 3 days off a week. So now I'm trying to have 3 half days off a week when he's off. I still work at night, but we kind of work around that. Since moving to Texas, I don't have a lot of friends in the area that I hang out with. I have a handful, but not a lot. I don't drive, so I don't go anywhere where I would really meet people. I don't know. It's just this lifestyle definitely works for us. And I do have to try to force time off because I have a tendency to just work nonstop. But it's not a problem for us. I mean, it works. I've been married it'll be 17 years in September, so it obviously works for us. Max says, hi Lisa, have you ever tried Fabriano Studio 90-pound hot press watercolor paper with polychromos? I can't get good color saturation, and it's the only hot press paper I can get in my area. No, I've only used the Fabriano Artistico. I've not tried that one. I think the other Fabriano paper I have here is cold press, so I can't compare there. Mara Black says, would you accept a forced type of barter? You had a specific type of work done, but you find out after the fact that they want a huge painting instead of money. Would you do this? Forced type of barter. Specific type of work done, but you find out after. That is a weird situation. Any barter that I've done, and I've done several, everything from when I had my studio assistants spayed and their first dentals done. I did a trade for artwork for the animal hospital that I had the work done at. I've traded for a lot of things. I love barters. I mean, I haven't done them in years, but I used to do them all the time. But they were always agreed upon in the first place. That is a weird situation that I don't even know how to answer. That would be a little weird to have someone just assume that you were going to do a huge painting for them. Because you need to make an agreement in the first place of, okay, this is what that painting is worth. This is what your work that you're doing for me is worth. How do we go ahead and make that arrangement? To do after the fact would be really difficult because somebody's going to feel cheated one way or another there. Pamela Brooks says, I started painting March 28th, 2016, and gave myself a goal of 100 paintings in a year. I have 5 paintings to go. Only 10 of those had been original. Was this a good plan for learning? Absolutely. I remember hearing a story from an artist who told me how he knew an artist who had gone to several art galleries and he kept getting declined. They didn't want his work. And he finally went to one, and the guy said, you know what? Come back after, like, how many paintings have you done? And the guy was like, 5, 10 paintings, whatever it was, is what he had done in his lifetime. And I guess they weren't bad. They just weren't, what the gallery was looking for. The gallery owner said, come back to me when you've painted 100 paintings, come back and talk to me. So we did that. It was 100 or 500. I forget. I want to say it was 100. So the guy did it. He came back, and the guy he had improved so much in that 100 paintings that now he fit the gallery. Now his techniques had been refined so much. So even though you were copying other things, they weren't your own originals. Yeah, you're probably not going to be able to sell those depending on what rights you were given when you copied those, like tutorials and such. You can't really sell those generally. But you learned so much because you set that. I think that's a wonderful goal. And yeah, anybody who is thinking, I want to improve, give yourself a goal of how many paintings you want to get finished. Now, don't sit and rush through the paintings, but get them done. Giving yourself goals, like I was talking about earlier, those goals will make a huge difference in what you're able to accomplish. As you can see through this, I'm going to go ahead and rinse the brush because we're just about done with this right now. This is largely rinse and repeat. It is a tedious process. I've got several layers to go. I'm going to do a lot of glazing. There's a lot that has to go on with this before it's finished. But it's just a layering, just lots of layering, clumps and clusters. The same thing with the grass, clumps and clusters. And you'll see more of this in the finished painting next week. But, oops, scroll down. That gives you an idea of how to do this. And if I were doing trees, same thing. I would do dark green, medium green, lighter green, at least 3 different shades to get the depth that I want for any of this. It's a layer, lots of layers. I think a lot of people make the mistake that they think I'm just going to put the right color in the right place, like a paint by number thing. That doesn't have a natural look. If you can layer like this. And the other thing to notice is how much paint I use. If you're getting a really rough, scratchy feel, you can see the previous color through it. That's not going to give you a very full effect. Get that paint on there. Don't be afraid to use more paint on your brush. Linda says, do you ever add paint to your titanium white mixture? Oh, you mean for colored pencil, the titanium white touch-up texture? If you mean that, no, because that would not be archival. That defeats the whole archival thing of how all of that works. For titanium white, for this, titanium white paint, yeah, I mean, I added color with it to get the lights here. So I think it depends on which medium you mean. Vicky said, have you ever, turn this off right now. Vicky said, have you ever done any art, or do you enter any art competition? If so, any advice on how to read what the judges are looking for? By the way, my first ever chance to see one of your live streams. Oh, welcome. I don't enter competitions, or I haven't anyway, in a very long time because they're just unimportant to me at this point. I did in the past. And the last one I entered, I actually had my painting, I had a painting that sold for $1,200 there, which sold for much more than any other painting there, including the award winners. And it was kind of a wake-up call of, it was worth entering because I sold the painting, but as far as getting the award, does the award matter, or does making the sale matter? Does having people want to purchase my work matter more? So it was kind of like, I don't know if winning those awards, that 50-cent ribbon, is worth me stressing out about what the judge wants versus what I think somebody else might be interested in, or what I'm interested in painting, because that's going to produce the best work if you're producing something that you're passionate about. I won an award at Catalina Island. There was an art show I did there, and that judge produced the very realistic work. It was similar in style, not so much technique or even subject or anything like that, but it was similar enough. He obviously appreciated the more detailed, a lot of the cleaner, tighter brushstrokes than what some other judges seem to look for. Most of the judges I've seen in most of the competitions like the looser feel, more abstract, things that weren't super realistic. Just depends on the judge though, what they like. And from what I've seen, if you can find out what that judge produces, that tends to be stuff that he's more drawn to. But I mean, even me, I judged a competition last year. That was hard, by the way. And with that, I was looking for composition. It wasn't even just style. Like, okay, I like owls, so I'm going to award somebody who painted else. For me, what I was looking for was composition, contrast, and how much was your eye drawn to that? When you look by, when I'm looking through hundreds of entries, which one am I quickly like, whoa, my attention was drawn here? Usually it's because of contrast and composition. Those are the things that are going to really draw in most people, no matter what style you enter in. So those are things, no matter what the judge is looking for: composition, contrast. Make sure you get those values, get that to where it's very pleasing. Your lighting, light source, something that you've got this really strong lights and darks. It's like the competition, or not the competition, the challenge that we're doing this month for the group challenge, the $9 a month Patreon group challenge. That one, we're doing these tulips that are just bold, and the way the light is hitting them, very, very strong and striking. That is what most judges are looking for, something that's striking, that you're looking through all of these different paintings, and that one captures your attention. And usually it's that lighting, that high contrast is what's going to get them to look twice. So those would be my tips on what to look for. And like I said, most judges, no matter what style they like, those are things that are going to be important to them. Because I mean, the one that I judged, there were some artwork in there that were so detailed, so realistic, but they just didn't have the contrast. They just didn't have the lighting. That, I mean, one of the pieces I probably would have been like, that's first, but it didn't have the lighting, so it didn't even rank. I mean, that hype up that contrast. I cannot stress that enough. Contrast and composition. Mara Black says, when I did large murals, I did freehand drawing on the surface. I thought it was the only way. Now on canvas, I trace and transfer, and I'm told that it's not real art anymore. Everyone has their ways that they like to work, and it's funny to me when somebody is self-important enough to decide what is or is not real artwork, or is not real art. I don't care what tools somebody uses to create art. Good art is good art. That's what matters to me. Your design, your layout, your contrast, your composition, what we were talking about, that has nothing to do with whether or not you traced. Whether or not you traced doesn't matter. What your end result is, that's what matters to me. And anybody who likes to do that, oh, that's not real art, that's easy, that's, you're cheating, you're whatever. I don't take those people seriously, because they don't know. They're misinformed. They've never painted themselves. They've never traced or used transfer paper in order to see what that can and cannot do for you. People think it's like this instant win button. It's not. If you can't draw, it shows in your finished work, whether you traced it or not. It's going to be quite obvious. The tracing and transfer and all of those techniques, that's just a tool. It's one tool that saves time. Again, if you can't draw, doesn't matter, because it's going to show in, it does matter. It's going to show in your end work. Tracing and using transfer paper is not an instant win button. I cannot stress that enough. I mean, I've taught enough years to tell you, I've traced things out for students and it didn't end well. It's not a guarantee. That's not what makes the art good. So when someone ever says that to you, I just kind of be like, okay, thank you for, your opinion's adorable, but I don't take it seriously at all, because that's not what matters to me in art. What matters to me is the end result, not the techniques or the tools you use to get there. And we are at 10:06, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I want to thank my moderators again, Valerie and Joseph Fincham, or Dead Jester, whichever username he's on tonight. Check out their channels. I've got links to both of those in the video description. Valerie does these beautiful wood burnings that are just stunning to me and kind of fascinate me, because I don't know how to do it very well. And then we've got Dead Jester, or Joseph Fincham, who does really nice paintings. So make sure to check out their channels. Thank you guys for being here and joining me. This is so much fun. I love doing this with you guys. And yeah, you will see the finished result on this next week, maybe with or without the deer being finished. At least the background will be finished. And you can see photos as I work over on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter. And I will see you guys next week. And next week will either be, actually, I have no idea what we're going to be doing next week. It could be the deer. I don't know. We'll see how far I get on this. I'll see you guys later. Bye.